Our big focus today, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed in Dhaka and was welcomed by Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. From the airport, Prime Minister Modi went to the National Martyrs Memorial where he participated in a wreath-laying ceremony and planted a sapling. Prime Minister Modi also signed the visitors' book at National Martyrs Memorial in Dhaka and wrote, and I'm quoting here, "Their valor will continue to inspire future generations to fight injustice and defend the cause of righteousness." And for more on this, we are now being joined by Constantino Xavier, Fellow in Foreign Policy and Security Studies at CSEP for more on this. Thank you so much for joining us. What can you tell us about the bilateral trade between the two countries in the post-pandemic world? Now, bilateral trade in goods between India and Bangladesh fell to about 7.82% in the 2019 to 20 financial year. How do you see the trade ties evolving now?
Thank you for having me. I think despite the abnormal year 2020, the figure you mentioned in decline, the broad trend is for growing trade flows between India and Bangladesh and for a strong economic partnership based on commercial ties. And that is in the end what you see today, also both leaders of Bangladesh and India emphasizing that never before have India and Bangladesh being as connected. And beyond values, politics, history, and culture, what really will connect these countries in the future is the economic ties. And for economic ties and for trade to flow, you need bridges, you need railways, you need waterways,
Absolutely.
You need a basic infrastructure.
Yes, I was actually just going to come to that. On that note, we know that during this visit, a number of pacts are to be signed, and the special focus, like you just mentioned, will be on railways, border infrastructure development, and also incentivizing startups. How do you assess the impact of this?
See, the best way to describe this is to quote the Foreign Affairs Advisor to Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Bangladeshi himself, saying that never before have the relations been deeper, wider, and better in the history because of this basic connectivity happening on the ground. Politics will come and go, there will be tensions in the relationship, but above all, what is really driving the relationship forward is the series of agreements that are not only being signed now, they date back to the late 2000s. It's been 10 years of progressive emphasis of India on the infrastructure connectivity with Bangladesh. And I have to say, it's unprecedented what you are seeing, really. The number of cross-border checkposts, railways, waterways, that have been developed over the recent years, and many more are now in the making for India in particular to also access the northeastern states.
And on that note, India grants, I think it's important to mention that India grants about 15 to 20 lakh visas every year to Bangladesh nationals for medical treatment, tourism work, and entertainment, just entertainment. Bangladesh and India have had a long-standing and time-tested protocol on transit and trade through inland waters. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So on the first issue you mentioned, very important, connectivity is not only infrastructure, it means also people-to-people ties. And if you look at Prime Minister Modi's op-ed today in the Daily Star, a Bangladeshi newspaper, he actually emphasizes that conflict, security issues, war, extremism will only be solved if there are also more people-to-people ties, more Bangladeshis coming to India, study in India, avail of India's tourism industry, medical services, educational institutions. That will take the relationship forward. On the second issue you mentioned on the protocol of waterways, see, we can only talk about connectivity now across the border because two major agreements have been signed, the land boundary agreement and the maritime shipping agreement. By putting those in place, now you can flesh out the protocols to basically allow Indian cargo to access Bangladesh, transit through the rivers in Bangladesh to even be transshipped to Tripura, Mizoram, Assam, etc. So that is really the strategy in place, and therefore waterways, for the first time in maybe 60 years in the history of this region, are being revived as major commercial routes for trade and for the flow of goods and people also between India, Bangladesh, and also let's not forget Bhutan, Nepal. There's a larger aspect that is not only connecting India and Bangladesh, but also India, Bangladesh, and the other regions, the Northeast, and the states of Bhutan and Nepal that are very interested in connecting also more with this huge economy, Bangladesh. Bangladesh is not a small country. I like to remind people that Bangladesh is the top 10 country in terms of its population. It has a population larger than Russia, and it's the most important neighbor for connectivity these days in India's neighborhood first policy.
All right, Mr. Xavier, just stay with us. We're also being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Abdul, joining us live from Dhaka. Siddhant, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has met with the Indian diaspora and also members of the minority community. Could you just talk about the significance of that?
Well, yes, meeting with the Indian community members was a key part of his visit to Bangladesh. In fact, as a protocol, whenever he goes outside abroad, he meets the Indian community. He also addresses them. This time, of course, he's not going to address them because perhaps due to COVID restrictions, but he was welcomed by a good amount of Indian community present in Bangladesh at the hotel where I am standing, where the Indian Prime Minister is staying. Other than that, he also met the Bohra community members. They are Bangladeshi national, but of course have a deep connect with India. He also met with MPs, Bangladeshi MPs, members who of course are allies with the ruling party here. So a diverse section of people the Indian Prime Minister is meeting here in Bangladesh, and that is expected to grow in terms of engagement when he goes outside Dhaka tomorrow, when he goes to Orakandi, he goes to Shakti Peeth, he goes to Tungipara, which is the birthplace of the father of the nation of Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. But by and large, the entire visit is about symbolism, about a growing relationship, about people-to-people connectivity.
All right. All right, Siddhant. Now going back to Mr. Xavier, also how do you assess the vaccine diplomacy? As you know, India has given about 9 million vaccine doses to Bangladesh. Also 1.2 million, as we just found out a little while ago, is being gifted to Bangladesh. How do you assess, how do you think this has strengthened ties between the two nations, and how do you see them sharing resources in the future as well?
Yeah. Just on the issue of people-to-people ties that Siddhant was mentioning, I think everyone in Bangladesh, every citizen of Bangladesh is one way or the other deeply connected to India and the surrounding region. So it's very difficult to assess who is more of a friend of India or not. I think every citizen of Bangladesh is deeply invested in some way or the other to the security, stability of this region. In fact, the foreign minister of Bangladesh mentioned, interestingly, that he looks forward towards a new subcontinent. This is not only about bilateral relationships, this is about a more integrated region. Coming to your question on vaccine diplomacy, see, India has always had an emphasis on the idea of being a first responder, that whenever its immediate neighbors, in particular Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Afghanistan, Bangladesh in this case, have some type of crisis, India will show up first to deliver immediate relief and support. And that has increased India's image as a credible, reliable partner that will assist Bangladesh in a moment of crisis. And the vaccine diplomacy, I think, has shown that very, very strongly, that India can be counted on to support countries when they need most.
All right, Mr. Xavier, thank you so much for joining us with all those inputs. Thank you for your time. Moving on, Bangladesh Foreign Minister A.K. Abdul thanked India for gifting 1.2 million COVID-19 vaccine doses. Let's just listen in.
Because this pandemic is a global one. And since it's a global issue, we have to work together in partnership and collaboration. Indian Prime Minister took a leadership role. We joined in that program. In addition, what we did, our Prime Minister made a clarion call to the leaders of the world that any vaccine, if developed, that should be considered as a public good. And it should be available to all countries, all the people, rich and poor, does not matter. And we also help in that process. And then, of course, because we were worried that, if it comes, it's one of the most densely populated countries. So we also negotiated with India that if you have any vaccine is developed, please, share those with us. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi assured our Prime Minister that if India gets the, vaccine, Bangladesh will get it at the same time. And he kept his word. And I thought by this, he has won the hearts and minds of the people. And we have paid for it. Initially, we asked India that we need 30 million vaccines because we have a large population. India agreed to it. We paid for it in advance. And now we are getting, but India was also, we are thankful to them, they also donated. They provided 2 million vaccines as a gift. And now again, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as a gesture of goodwill on the 50th anniversary of Bangladesh, on the 100th anniversary of our father nation, is giving